Okay, we're live.
All right. I'd like to call to order the EWG School Committee meeting. First order of business is election of the school committee chairperson. I'd like to recognize school committee member Diane Allen.
Hi, yes, I would like to nominate Paul McFadden as chairperson.
I'll second that.
Oh, okay, never mind.
All right. Now, have Mike as seconded, Robin. All right, I'd like to bring the motion, I'd like to call the motion to order. Diane Allen, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mike Basillo?
Aye.
Are we in
Member
silent
Griffith?
mode or
No, Bob,
is everybody just quiet?
they're talking.
Member Griffiths?
Nay.
Member Monroe?
Nay.
Member Pandy?
Nay.
Member Haldeman? Was that a yay?
That was a yeah.
And
No.
I also am an affirm
I got
on
no
that
audio.
motion. Who is that?
That was Mr. Ross. I just muted him.
All right. And Mr. McFadden and yays. The motion carries. Next order of business is vice chair. I'd like to nominate Diane Allen as vice chair of the EWG School Committee.
I'd like to second that.
I'd like to bring the motion to vote. Diane Allen,
Aye.
Mike Basillo,
Aye.
Member Griffiths,
Aye.
Member Monroe,
Aye.
Member Pandy.
Nay.
Was that a nay?
Nay.
Member Haldeman,
Aye.
Member McFadden is yay. Next order of business is selection of a secretary of the EWG School Committee. Are there any nominations for this position? Not hearing any, the position will remain vacant for the time being. All right, I'm going to proceed to open forum. Comments must be direct, 3-minute limit per individual, 15-minute maximum time allowed for open forum. Comments must be directed to the chairperson of the school committee, who may limit or terminate a discussion. No comment should address personnel, litigation, or negotiations as restricted by open meetings regulations. The school committee cannot take action or vote on topics introduced that are not reflected on the agenda. Jeremy, is there anyone in the audience right now that would like to be recognized?
If anybody would like to be recognized, please raise your hand. Or if you're on the phone, press *9. I see none.
All right. I'm going to proceed to the consent agenda. Jim, can you read the consent agenda for the school committee?
Yeah, Paul, before we move to that, I could see a hand up. There's a member of the audience named Crystal Welch who had her hand up for a public comment. Do you want to recognize her first?
Oh, sorry. I didn't see that.
Hi, yes, I'm Crystal Welch. This is my first school board meeting, so I wanted to get on with you all today because my daughter is 5 years old and she will be entering the Exeter West Greenwich school system this coming fall as a kindergartner. I'm actually brand new to West Greenwich. I just am moving into my house this week from Portsmouth, Rhode Island. So I do want to say that I've heard wonderful things about the school system, about the superintendent, which gives me great hope for what I came on this call for. I have sent you all a letter and I'm just going to read that letter, so I won't take too long. but I just want to encourage you all to make masks optional this coming school year. There are many reasons why masking children has been disastrous, including socialization, instilling fear in our children, learning delays, health concerns, etc. It is my hope that the Exeter West Greenwich school system will unmask our children, regardless of their COVID vaccination status. Continuing to mask children who are not vaccinated not only promotes bullying for children who are eligible for the vaccine, but a blanket mask policy for elementary students is not based on scientific evidence. Our children have been through enough over the past 16 months, and they deserve to have a normal education and to play with their friends. There is no clear data or evidence to support a continuation of these mask mandates that have been imposed on our children. We are not in a state of emergency, and our rates remain very low in this area. Not to mention, COVID is very mild in children. I don't understand why we continue to mask our children when there have been 0 child deaths in Rhode Island due to COVID. The majority of the states have lifted their mask mandates in their schools, and they are they making their decisions based on different scientific evidence than Rhode Island? I can't understand why Rhode Island's children are still expected to be masked. There is a large group of concerned parents in Rhode Island that are fighting back when it comes to excessive use of emergency powers and mask mandates imposed on our children. The momentum is growing by the day, and there are active petitions, signs, groups, and parents that have watched their children suffer due to all of the COVID mandates. This is not our children's burden to bear. I do imagine that the Exeter West Greenwich School Board is made up of empathetic, intelligent people who want the best for our children. And I am asking you to please advocate for our babies and remove these masks so our children can get back to normal and thrive this coming school year. I also want to add that I did post in a Facebook group about this, welcoming myself. I'm not sure if I made a good impression or not, but asking people to call if they were concerned about the issue. I did have a woman respond saying that you guys were so wonderful and you handled everything so well that she didn't think anybody should reach out. And 21 people liked her comment, and she said that she didn't agree with masking. So I was kind of like, okay, well, that's great that you guys are so wonderful, but you should still maybe send an email or call just so that your voice is heard. So that's really all I wanted to say. Thank you very much for hearing me out on this.
Jeremy, is there anybody else who has their hand raised?
Not
Hello?
at this time.
All right. That ends the public forum. Jim, could you please read the consent agenda to the school committee?
Yeah, sorry. Under consent, we have the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting from June 22nd. We have 3 appointments. These are, one is for a retirement for a speech and language pathologist. We have a treasurer's assistant position. This is based on some restructuring and movement with our Council 94 members. And of one of our teacher assistants into a building clerk position, and that is also due to a retirement that took place last year. We have a couple of leaves of absence that are in the packet. Some Council 94 recalls. We now are at the point where our Council 94 non-certified staff will be fully in place after this meeting. And we have our monthly bills. And then we have a number of homeschool approvals for returning families. And this is typical at this stage of the summer. That's it.
Would any of the members like a part of the consent agenda pulled for discussion? Hearing none, I'd like a motion to entertain to pass the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Call the vote. Member Allen?
Aye.
Member Pasillo?
Aye.
Member Griffiths?
Aye.
Member Monroe,
Aye.
Member Pandy,
Aye.
Member Haldeman.
Aye.
I'm an aye. Consent agenda passes.
Mr. McFadden, can I just introduce our new employees?
You may.
Okay, so I noticed that we have on the call Leah Genza. She's showing up as Leah Bassett, but Leah is our new speech and language pathologist for the district. She will be spending the majority of her time at Metcalf School, and she's replacing one of our retired speech and language pathologists. So we welcome Leah. She has extensive experience in residential type settings with children who have significant behavioral needs and communication needs. So she brings some expertise to our district that is quite welcome. So welcome aboard. It's official, Leah. You're on staff. And then I want to have Bob introduce Rena, who is the newest member of our central office team.
So very pleased to announce Rena Ortiz joining our finance team. Rena's a recent graduate from Rhode Island College, and after over a month of unsuccessful recruiting within the bargaining unit and out in the marketplace, using our School Spring platform and a couple other, Indeed also. Part of our partnership or part of our endeavor is to reach out and work with colleges, and we've built a pretty good relationship with Rhode Island College as far as seeking financial candidates that they might recommend, and they recommended Rena, and she applied and she met all the criteria and met with the team, and we couldn't be happier to have a young, energetic, college-educated woman join our workforce. So welcome, Rena.
Welcome aboard, Leah and Rena. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank
you, everyone.
Welcome, Rena. Welcome.
Thank you.
Glad to have you join us.
Very good. There are no correspondences on the agenda, but I'd like to make a brief comment that the former chairman Claudine Pandy's resignation email should be in the next meeting's correspondences. Robin, if you could. I don't even know if Robin's on the call.
I sent that to all school committee members, Member McFadden. It doesn't need to be in the packet. It just needs to be kept in central office in a school committee file.
If that's the way you want it.
Yep,
Okay.
it doesn't need to be in the packet.
All right. Okay, next item on the agenda is the 2021 budget. Jim and or Bob.
Just the budget, as you can see, if you've looked at it, this isn't the formal, this is the standard report that we put in. If you did take a look at it, you can see that the budget balance for 2021 is showing that we've got 684,460, but we're still working on closing out POs and reconciling some of the billings. So I expect some movement on that final number, because this would be the final document for this is the 21 budget. So that's a positive sign. We have a positive number, but I anticipate that the 684, there'll be some movement on that, and that will come in my projections. Probably I'll have one in August, but it's the time of year where it's like, let's just wait. We have the auditors in house right now, so as they zero in on the final number, rather than putting out a slew of different numbers, we'll just concentrate on that final number. But everything's good.
Any questions from the membership? Bob, I have a question. Do you anticipate we ending in the positive?
Absolutely.
I remember that. All right. Next order of business, under new business, I had this topic added, Exeter Group Home Aid Reimbursement Discussion. Jim, do you want to crack at this, or do you want me to take a crack at it?
So Mr. McFadden asked that this be put on the agenda. I said that I would describe basically what currently happens. We have one group home that remains in the district. It is located in Exeter, and it currently has 9 beds. As part of the aid that is received by districts for education aid, it comes as a categorical allotment. We receive money for each bed. And so it's 9 beds times whatever the allocation is, roughly $15,000. And that we have typically included as a revenue in our annual budget. And that revenue obviously offsets the impact on taxpayers. Because obviously the more revenue we have, the less we need from local. So that is typically how that has occurred. When I first got here, we had 2 group homes. We received bed aid for both group homes. The group home that was located in West Greenwich closed several years ago. We're down to 1, and that is what that revenue is all about. It's just based on beds. It is not based on the actual educational cost of the children that are housed there. It's just a bed allotment per the law. So that's what currently happens. But there was a question about that, which, Paul, I think you want to explain what you wanted to talk about.
Correct. The reason I had to put this on the agenda, the law changed around 2016 specifically. I'm not exactly sure, but the particular section of the law, which we do not have a copy of in our packet, but it's 16-64-1, and it reads, and pardon me, because I got to read this like 4 font with my bad glasses here, reads, children placed in group foster care in child care facilities or by Rhode Island state agencies or a Rhode Island group home, child caring facility, or foster home is located for the purposes of the enrollment in this city or town shall be reimbursed, or the city's education shall be paid for in accordance with 1664-1-1. So my contention here is that the funding we receive from DCYF, which we currently receive $108,000, give or take, is actually a reimbursement of tuition to put that child in our school system, and it is reimbursable to the city or town as described in that law. So it refers to 1664-1.1, whereas the how the money comes as in a reimbursement, what agencies and what amount. But the law that I'm questioning is 16-64-1 that states essentially that this is a reimbursement. The practice today is that the state gives about $108,000 for the 9 beds for the individual. I'm sorry, for X number of beds at the group home in Exeter, which may not necessarily be 9. Exeter is also charged for these children, and they are charged approximately $23,000 and change based on the overall cost per student in either town. So either town has to bear the burden based on the kid count, an amount of $23,000 or more. So currently the school department is receiving revenue from the state for a child that's in the group home, and they're also charging the town of Exeter for its tuition. And the way it reads is it appears that the law states that this is a reimbursement, that is to the city or town. Now, for most cities and towns, the school is a line item in the town budget. Therefore, all the money goes to the treasurer, the town treasurer, the accounting department of that town that has a school department. In our case, we are a regional school district. We have our own financial organization, and those monies are deposited in that organization by DCYF or by state aid via DCYF. So my contention here is basically that the town of Exeter should see this as a reimbursement as opposed to a bill to the town of Exeter. And by that, I mean currently, I would think a satisfactory outcome of this problem would be, since the state gives us $17,000 per group home bed provided that they are grandfathered in. That's another dilemma. And the actual bill is $23,000, say it's $900 per student, regardless of town. Then what the town of Exeter really should be paying is the difference between $23,900 and $17,000 that the state gives the school department, and the difference would be about $6,000. So $6,000, let's say it's 8 students. So the bill for those 9 students would be about $48,000. And there is a little bit, and where it gets to be a little bit more complicated under law is that if the child is grandfathered into the law, which means that, and they're there till the age of 22, they can, that normally you would get reimbursement from the town of origin. So if we had a child in Exeter that came from West Warwick, all the charges would go to the town of West Warwick and they would reimburse us. It's a wash. We don't care. But if the child is grandfathered in under the law, then Exeter is charged as well as the state agency, and the difference is $6,000. And so my summary of this, if I can conclude, is that I feel that the school department owes the town of Exeter the reimbursement that comes from DCYF as described in the general law 16-64-1.1. That was pretty confusing. So does anybody would like to make any comments on this at this point?
Oh, it's member
Question.
Panday. May I speak?
Chairman recognizes member Pandy.
Okay, so that was all kind of confusing. I'm going to refer to legal on all this, but I just want to kind of keep it basic. So the school district pays to educate the children in the group homes, and the towns are apportioned a part of our budget, if you will. And then the group home aid is a credit in our budget, if you will, and that reduces the amount that the towns have to pay. So I kind of want to put that out there. And then in the legislation, so in the Rhode Island statute, Paul, just, it says the city or town shall pay the cost of education of the child during the time a child is in foster care or in the city. Like and I'll refer this to Mary Ann, but it refers to city or town a couple of times. It doesn't, in our situation, it's a school district that pays, but I think it refers to city or town when it comes to paying and when it comes to reimbursing. So I guess if you're saying that Exeter is looking for a reimbursement or to get the group home aid, I guess I would look to Exeter to pay to educate the children in the group home. And if I'm not mistaken, our superintendent can let us know that's millions of dollars each year, if I'm correct. So I would say if Exeter wants a reimbursement, then they need to pay for the full bill. But that's not how the legislation reads, regardless. So again, I would refer to legal.
Thank you. This is Mary Ann Carroll. I'm covering the meeting this evening.
I'm sorry, this is the chairman.
Hi, yeah,
Before you answer that, I'd like to make a comment.
you're running the meeting. I apologize. Go ahead.
All right. So I'd like to recognize some of Pandy's, member Pandy's remarks. It's very difficult, but basically when you're looking at city or towns will make reimbursement, that part of the law is referring to the child's origin. So if a city or town has an origin, if the child has an origin of West Warwick or Coventry or North Smithfield, and they are referred to the group home that's in Exeter, then that city or town is responsible for the entire amount of money for the spend of that child, provided they don't fall into the grandfather respect of the law. Now, we use that often. So if I'm a new child and I showed up there in August of this year, the full expense of that child, and I came from North Smithfield, the full expense, if it cost us $120,000 to support that kid for outsourcing education, goes to the town of North Smithfield. If, on the other hand, I'm sorry. I
agree with that, Member McFadden. Our superintendent actually took the lead on that legislation. He was the lead person to get that law changed.
Right. And we do have new members. Okay. So, but on the occasion that the child has been there for an extended period of time, yes, the schools department, the Exeter West Greenwich, has to make up the difference between an average costing student of $23,900 and the cost that is associated with the student to make them whole. In other words, if it costs them $120,000 to get a proper education for that child per year, the school department is responsible for that $120,000, not the $23,900. Now, with regarding another point Ms. Pandy had to make, we do not charge each individual town a premium when a child from that town today, education costs more than an average student's education, the $23,900, and I'm guessing at that. So if a student from any city or town, and these kids for all intents and purposes are residing in the town of Exeter, then that premium is folded into the average cost that's sent out to both towns, and for the sake of argument, let's just say it's $23,900. Imagine the chaos we would be living in if certain students had an IEP that required an education of $100,000, and we said that cost is, because that child lives in the town of Exeter or West Greenwich, has to be incurred by that particular town. There would be just financial chaos. So the method that it is the total cost of any child that has special need education and elevated costs beyond the $23,900, it is folded into the $23,900. My argument, of course, is that the children of the group home, which is in Exeter, are residents of the town of Exeter. That's where they sleep, that's where they eat, and that's where they live. Okay, I will now recognize legal at this time. And your name again is?
Yes, this is Mary Ann Carroll. I'm Hennius Carroll Lombardo, and I'm covering this meeting this evening. Mr. McFadden, after listening to you for a little while, I know where you're coming from, because you're coming from a position that these laws, when written, were written for school districts that aren't regional. So I can see where it would be somewhat confusing, where once they talk about, reimbursement to the school district, and in 1664-1, they talk about reimbursement to the city or town. So after listening to your explanation, I see where the confusion lies. Many of these laws are written for school districts that aren't regional. And I think we have 4 regional school districts in Rhode Island where this would be a confusing section to understand. Here's what I recommend. Attorney Hennius had sent an email to Chief Legal Counsel at RIDE asking for him to weigh in and look at your concerns with 1664 1.1 and now 1664-1. I suggest that we follow up with that request that RIDE weighs in on this so that they can further explain what was meant by both of these statutes. It may be that the group home kids should not be counted into Exeter's students when you figure out the percentage. That could be a solution to this. Every regional district does their percentages differently. But at this point, the only thing we can do is my suggestion that we go back to Mr. Catone, who's the chief legal counsel, and ask him to give us an opinion as to exactly what you're talking about tonight, Mr. McFadden. That would be my recommendation.
Are there any other questions or comments from the membership? Marinakis? Go ahead, Claudine.
No, Jim, you go ahead. You can go. I'll go after Jim.
Oh, I didn't have my hand up.
Okay. No, I just wanted, so I'm still kind of confused by all this. So if Exeter and West Greenwich, according to what our apportionment is currently, contribute towards the cost to educate the children in the group home, and currently the group home aid goes back into the budget to reduce the amounts the towns are charged overall. I'm still confused as to why Exeter would get a reimbursement in aid. I don't know. Am I the only one of the membership who is confused by this?
Mr. Chair, may I weigh in again?
You may.
So the reimbursement does not make sense to me, but what does make sense to me is you have students in a group home. And right now, these laws change every few years. I'm sure your superintendent can tell you several years ago, it was if you went into the group home, that district was responsible. Years before that, it was your district of origin was responsible. And now that we have ESSA, there's always a determination as to who is responsible. So I see both of these laws, they could be changing next year for all we know to make it clearer. I think what Mr. McFadden's position is if the students in the group home, they seem to be counted toward Exeter's apportionment of whatever each person's percentage of what you pay for education. Now, I'm not familiar with how you do your apportionment, but normally in the districts that I am familiar with, and I live in Forster, Gloucester, so if you have 100 Exeter kids and 200 West Greenwich kids, then West Greenwich is responsible for 2/3 of the budget and Exeter is responsible for 1/3 of the budget. I assume that's pretty much something the way you do it now.
Yeah.
So I think what Mr. McFadden is saying is if the group home students, if the region is going to be reimbursed by the money from the group home students, which they are, the money gets reimbursed to you through your state aid quarterly, then maybe we should come up with a solution where those students in a group home aren't apportioned to either district. And maybe that's the way we figure out how to make it fair. But having said that, I think the only person that could weigh in on this and help us is Attorney Catone, who is the chief legal counsel at RIDE, because again, these laws were written for non-regional districts, and you're a regional district, and maybe we need some clarification. So as I said, Mr. Henny has asked Mr. Catone for an opinion. Mr. Catone had some family issues, hasn't gotten back to us. Maybe what we need to do is wait until Mr. Catone is able to weigh in. And then once we get Mr. Catone's decision, then turn around and maybe bring this up again. That would be my recommendation, Mr. McFadden.
Member Allen has her hand raised.
Yes, I agree with the attorney. I think that we should see what RIDE has to say about this. And perhaps a good solution is to just take them out of the count for Exeter, the 9 beds. If that's what RIDE would suggest.
That seems reasonable. but I'd be interested to see what they have to say.
So with your authority, members of the committee, I will pursue the opinion at RIDE.
Do we
If I
need to
could-
vote on that?
It's
Could
not
I
a
wait?
voting.
Could I weigh in on this, please?
Yes.
Chairman recognizes Robert Ross.
So just for the benefit of the core and for legal, as we pursue a remedy, a possible remedy. So just confirming that we do count those folks those students in the enrollment. So they are definitely part of the apportionment for Exeter. But secondly, I'm looking at the distribution from the state, because the group home aid comes in the form of state aid. And we are the recipient, the district is the recipient of that state aid. And it comes on a monthly basis. So I am not sure in the remedy, if we're looking at that, how would that work for us? Because on the outward facing from the state aid document that's published for the enacted state aid, it would show, I just don't know how they would reflect that the district is not receiving this year $123,000. And then so that would be one. How would that get reflected in the state aid? And then number two, who would be the recipient of those funds? Would it be passed through the district and then onward to the towns, or would it go directly to the towns?
May I respond, Mr. Chair?
You may.
I'm not suggesting that we're not going to get the money. I'm saying if there's an issue that, these students are living in Exeter and we're getting money for these students in Exeter, maybe the issue is we've got to ask RIDE for a fair way to count these students so they're not considered Exeter students. And so Exeter isn't paying a higher proportion because these students are there. So in answer to your question, Mr. Ross, I don't know the answer. I believe you have every right to get every single penny of state aid for the students that are in beds, because we know that when they become Exeter West Greenwich students, they cost more than your regular ed student. Most of them come with issues, otherwise they wouldn't be in a group home. But what I'm saying is I'd like to turn this over to RIDE, having now heard the chair's where he thinks the problem is. After hearing what he had to say, this is an issue for RIDE, and this is an issue because you're a regional district, and when the laws are written, they're written for non-regional districts, and maybe we can figure out a solution without having the school district have to give any money back to Exeter.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, Member Panday has her hand raised as well.
No,
Chairman recognizes.
I forgot to take it down. I'm good.
Okay. So does any other of the members of the school committee have any questions or comments at this time? I'm not proposing a motion on this matter at this time. I think that the suggestion by council to reach out to the Rhode Island Department of Education's legal counsel for guidance on this is sufficient at this time. And unless anybody else has any questions or comments, I'd like to move on to the next topic on the agenda. And we'll bring this forward once we get a response from the Rhode Island Department of Education legal. All right. Under new business, 21-22, return to school guidance and updates. Jim?
Yes. So I put this on the agenda because on June 29th, districts received the initial draft guidance for reopening schools for September of 2021. And I know that this is a public document and people have seen it. People have heard the governor talk about it. I know we had a member of the community speak during public forum. I have heard from many members of our communities weighing in on their opinions related to what the governor is suggesting, but I wanted to just go over a couple of the highlights from the guidance that we received on the 29th. So this will just take me a couple of minutes. I highlighted the key points. First, the expectation is that all students will be back in person 5 days a week, and that we are not required to provide a distance learning option as we did during the previous year. That's something that I've shared with you already. In terms of spacing and grouping, we are encouraged to maintain stable groups wherever it is feasible, but particularly in grade levels that are not eligible for vaccination. So at the secondary schools, all of the children are eligible for vaccination. They are not suggesting that we maintain stable groups. We can't at the high school anyway. But it is something that we do as a matter of practice anyway in the elementary schools. So that is something that we will maintain. We are recommended that we need to have 3 feet of distance between stable groups, and that there needs to be some distancing while kids are eating in the cafeteria. At middle and high school, they are not recommending physical distancing. It's not required. In terms of masks, this is the issue that has a lot of people weighing in, and I want to just share with you what the guidance is. And then when I'm done sharing the guidance, I'll weigh in a little bit with some of the conversations that I've been having with superintendents across the state, in particular superintendents from our region, and then some follow-up conversations that we're having with the governor. So staff members who are fully vaccinated are not required to wear a mask. Masks are not required outdoors. Masks are required on buses. That is still that's part of a federal order. Masks are required by federal order on school buses and other forms of public transportation in the United States. So that's not something that we can weigh in on at the current time. That federal order is still in place. So kids would have to wear a mask on buses. Masks are not required at the schools where kids are eligible for vaccination. So middle school, no masks. High school, no masks required. Obviously, they can wear them if they would like to, but they are not required. The issue that we have is at the elementary schools. In our elementary schools, the children are not eligible for vaccination. And while we had guidance, well, it wasn't guidance, it was basically a mandate last year that children were to be masked. At the current time, the guidance says for indoors, it is strongly recommended that districts create masking policies requiring all unvaccinated individuals to wear a mask while indoors. And then mask use is optional for individuals who are fully vaccinated. The difference that we have is that last year it was a mandate, and this year it is a recommendation, not a mandate. We happen to be in a community where the rate of COVID infection is really low. We are surrounded by communities with very low infection rates and spread rates at the current time. Although we still will monitor with the variants out there, things could change. But the big issue that people are weighing in on is this difference now between a mandate and a recommendation. So I'll talk more about that in a second. We are allowed to reinstate field trips. They can resume as long as health and safety policies are met. In terms of transportation, they have lifted all of the capacity restrictions for school buses. So remember last year we needed to add a tier of buses so that we could make sure that buses were not overpopulated. We don't have to worry about that this year. That mandate has been lifted. And in terms of quarantine, There were several standards and options for quarantining, and we stuck with the gold standard for the most part last year. They are now recommending that we move from the 14-day quarantine to a 7-day with testing quarantine option. We still anticipate that there will be positive cases. And if that happens, they are no longer giving options. They're suggesting that based on the data, it's a 7-day quarantine option. And as long as there is a negative test on day 5 or later, the child would be allowed to return to school. We still would have to monitor for symptoms, but the quarantine period is reduced from 14 to 7. And then in terms of testing, so we have had on-site testing, random testing. Nobody is required. We went through that. We're not doing mandatory testing, none of that stuff. But we have had a number of parents who have allowed their children to participate in random testing. And what they are now suggesting is that in a low transmission community, which is where we stand right now, no testing is required. If we move to a moderate transmission rate, which again, we're not there, they are still suggesting that no testing would be required. But if we move to a substantial or a high transmission phase, which is, on the maps that you see every night, it's the dark color, red, orange colors. If we move into the high transmission rate, then they are suggesting that there's randomized testing, but we're not testing individuals that have said no, right? If the parent doesn't want the child tested, they're not tested. But at this current time, we would have no testing requirements based on our current transmission rates. So these are the decisions that we're going to need to work through as we develop our reopening guidance. I think the one area that is of greatest concern right now is masking. I will just say that in the conversations that we've had as an organization and in the conversations I've had with our surrounding communities, we think that it is best based on the transmission rates and based on the public outreach that we've had, that it is in our best interest to make masks optional for kids at all grade levels, unless we get to the point where the transmission rate is high. And at that point, we think that the Department of Health would put a mandate back in place. And that's where we are. We are having some follow-up conversations with the governor. What happened last year is when decisions were left to individual districts and districts made different decisions, it was a nightmare, because that's where parents said, well, why is it that in this community this is the case, and in this community they're doing something different? It was insane. And so if we're not at the place where the governor and the Department of Health feel that it needs to be mandated, then they should say that it's optional. If they feel it needs to be mandated, then they should say it needs to be mandated. But it is not in my realm of expertise to make this decision. I am not a health expert. I'm not a scientist. I don't have expertise in COVID, although I'm getting there. I think it's really unfair for those of us not in the field of pandemics to make decisions about health and safety measures. So that's really our stance with the governor. I think he's leaning in the direction that I have suggested, that it'll be an optional, strongly recommended, but optional for indoor use at the elementaries, and certainly optional at the secondaries, particularly for kids that have chosen not to get vaccinated. That's where the current thinking is. I don't know if the school committee wants to weigh in. I think I know where most of you stand, but I'm not surprised to see that there are members of the public that are on listening. I'm not surprised that we had someone who wanted to speak at the public forum. I would suggest that we'll have more and more people asking to speak, sending communications, sending their opinions to you and to me until we get to a place where the final decision is made and it is publicized. But I thought it would be good for us to break the silence and at least have the conversation so people in the community know what our thinking is at the current time. So I don't know if anybody has a comment on that.
This is the chairman. I'd like to open the floor for questions or comments from the membership.
Member Allen is raised.
Member Allen, go ahead.
I think Jim knows that I stand for no masks in the elementary because I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's an approved vaccine. And I totally agree with Krista, who spoke earlier tonight, that I don't think young children should be wearing masks. I think it's actually unhealthy.
Member Monroe has her hand raised.
Chairman recognizes Member Monroe.
Jim, you didn't speak to, I know with the reopening committee, we talked a lot about the cleaning and the custodial efforts. I think as a parent, one of my biggest concerns has to do with just, I've seen this summer, my child has gone from not being exposed to anything for a year and a half, as well as my whole household pretty much. We just are like, basically we can see a germ from a mile away and it gets us. So I'm just concerned about any spread of, I think the kids are going to be more susceptible to being sick and spreading germs, similar to what we see around January and February with the flu and how that impacts attendance. And it does affect, our ability or teachers' ability to instruct. So can you share with us any plans you have as far as, cleaning and doing our best to try to ease into exposure for kids to all germs?
So I didn't, there is a section on cleaning, disinfection, hand hygiene in the guidance that was released. It really hasn't changed significantly, which is why I didn't address it. We are still required to have a significant amount of PPE, personal protective equipment. We are still required to meet the CDC guidance for cleaning, disinfection, and hygiene. All of those things will still be in place. And I am going to reconvene the Reentry Committee. Last summer we had 75 or 80 people between school employees and community. No, it was just 75 to 80 community members that helped us write and review our plan for reentry. That will happen, but we haven't gotten the template yet or the questions that we're required to answer. I just know that based on the conversations that we're having, that the things we need to address are also covered in this initial RIDE document that we received on the 29th of June. So yes, there is additional cleaning and hygiene and PPE. There's a bunch of that stuff, and that needs to be included in a reopening, but we've already been doing that for quite a bit of time. We've been doing it really well, and we'll just continue with that process into next year until we're told that we can go back to normal.
I think that's huge, especially with the littles, if you will, just so generous with their germs.
Indeed.
Member Panday wishes to be recognized.
Are there any other questions or comments from the membership?
Member Panday wishes to be recognized.
Member Panday, proceed. Jim, what did they say about testing? I guess I'm just curious about testing because I know, so right now the common cold is prevalent because like Member Monroe stated, germs are now reestablishing themselves. I had a really bad head cold and I got tested 3 times because it's all the same symptoms. So what do they say for testing? So if the little kids start getting low grade temperature, sore throat, runny nose, you think they're going to require there be a higher requirement for some testing? You won't know if they have what they have.
Yeah. So again, This is a 7-page document that we received, so it certainly does not have the lengthy detail that we've received in the past, but we asked for something so we could at least get our thinking started. In terms of testing, I think before we have the conversation about testing, we need to talk about symptoms and what that means for staff and for students. The guidance suggests that if a student has a symptom, then they are not allowed to come to school, just like was the case this year. And if they are fever-free for 24 hours and back to regular health, meaning they're symptom-free, then they can return without testing. Testing really was a requirement when they had the big symptoms, right? The loss of taste or smell. There were like 3 big symptoms. I'm trying to forget as much of this as possible for the next month or so. But I don't think that they're changing any of the testing requirements based on symptoms, because I think that that's been pretty consistent. So I at this current time, yes, there will be testing, but it will be based on the severity of symptoms. And then if we have kids that are close contacts to someone who does test positive, then they must quarantine, and they can return in 7 days as opposed to the 14-day, as long as they get tested on day 5 or 6, right? So there's a testing requirement. And then if the transmission rate gets to a high level, which we're not even close to at the current time, but if it gets to a high level, then there's a requirement that we do randomized testing in all of the buildings. And I think the suggestion is 25% of the student population. And those would be the Binax testing, the quick tests, which we did last year. It was easy, never had a problem with that. And our nurses and staff did it ourselves. So we would have to go back to that. If we do the randomized testing and we're not getting any positive cases, then they feel comfortable that they don't need to do any additional testing beyond that. But those are the 3 areas that I can see based on the 7-page document that was shared with us, where testing would be would come into play. Other than that, no additional testing. But it's very consistent with what we did this past year.
Okay. So we might have a higher absentee rate if they have symptoms, they can't come to school, correct?
Yeah, I mean, but we lived it the whole year, this whole past year.
Yeah, but now we have the common cold and coming back with a vengeance.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Are there any other members that have questions or comments at this time?
I see no hands.
Jim, I have a couple. Sorry.
Sure.
Jim, I have a couple of questions. When will the direction or the documentation for parents to read going to be, or when do you have to have it available, or when do you plan on having it available for parents to consume? What data you?
Yeah, it's a good question. By this time last year, we actually had the template, the reentry plan template that needed to be created, and we had the due dates. So I want to say that it was due in July. I know, Andrea, you were on that committee. Does that sound right? I think it was July that the initial draft was due to the Department of Ed. We don't even have the template yet. So I don't know when I'll have the template ready because we haven't gotten the direction yet from the Department of Ed. That is a question that we have it on our agenda for our next meeting with the governor and or the Department of Ed, but we have not gotten an answer on that yet. I am told that the template this year will be significantly shorter than the template for last year. That we don't have to plan for like 4 different scenarios like we did last year. We are only planning for 1 scenario, and that's full reentry. We don't have to do alternate transportation plans. The spacing is different. Like there's a lot of things that we are no longer required to address. So it will be significantly easier. And I don't think that, at least based on the communications that I've had so far, I don't think that parents have any concern about distancing and whether or not we're going to use stable pods and, you know, reducing from the 14 to the 7-day quarantine, because that's what the CDC is suggesting. I think really what the parents want to hear is, what is our stance going to be on masks? And, you know, at this point, I think everybody around us is moving in the direction of optional, unless we get to a high transmission rate. And at that point, it may not be our decision any longer. It might be a mandate based on the high transmission rates. If I were able to make that decision today and put that out to the community, I don't think you'd hear another thing from anybody.
Does the school committee have to approve the template with the guidance on return to school?
They have not. Yeah, they've not. The template that we filled out the last time, there were like 80 members of the community. We had school committee representation that sat on the committee. We had community members that sat on the committee, staff members, myself. It was a document that we created collaboratively with a ton of people, and we just presented it to the school committee. You presented it, but it didn't require the school committee's approval then. Correct. I mean, there was feedback and there were suggestions that we incorporated, which we had been doing all summer long, but it didn't require a vote.
Sure. And I think the only way you could possibly get a lot of questions or comments from, you know, parents of concern is if they're waiting for it anxiously and they feel that they're not getting it,
right,
you know, with enough time that they can react. So I'm sure you'll keep that in mind.
Yep.
I'm going to return to the same question. Does any of the members have any questions or comments further on this matter?
Yeah, this is John Holderman. I have a question, comment.
Proceed, John.
Thank you. Just a point of logistics here. Jeremy, I shot you a chat letting you know that I had a comment. Maybe it's not working. So just
no, I'm sorry. I didn't have the chat.
Yeah, I didn't have my video on. So yeah, with as a parent with a child in the school district going into first grade, I kind of want to echo what Diane said, that I don't really think masks should be required at all, especially for the little kids. You know, sniffles, runny nose is kind of a part of life. I just had a question though. Jim, you were mentioning that teachers who are vaccinated have the option to wear or not wear a mask. Non-vaccinated teachers are required to wear a mask. How does that work? Is there going to be like some kind of like ID check or attestation, or how does that work for the teachers there?
I'm not really sure yet. I do know that we have a vaccination rate in our staff that's very, very, very high. Most of our staff are vaccinated, but that's one of the things that we're going to have to spell out in our reentry plan. You know, how do we maintain the health and safety of staff members, particularly staff members that are working with unvaccinated children? And that would, I don't know the answer to this, but it would basically require us to either know whether an individual is vaccinated or not, or that they have to do a self-attestation to indicate their vaccination status. But we have to figure that out as part of the reentry plan that we have to submit to the Department of Ed. I don't know the answer yet, but it is a really good question. It's the top question on my mind. I don't know how we do it yet.
Yeah, I know a lot of employers are struggling with the same thing, because you're gonna, if you require an ID, I don't know if there's a HIPAA scenario there, or if there's a teacher's wearing a mask versus not wearing a mask. Just like with kids, there could be a bullying thing happening. Now there's going to be I don't know. So I think it's going to be a challenge.
Yep. There's no challenge that we can't handle after what we went through last year.
Yeah, fair enough. It was a rough year. I hear you. Thank you.
Member Monroe wishes to be recognized.
Member Monroe, please proceed.
I think one other area that I'm sure you already have going on, but that I've heard from parents as well, just as part of the PTA. I know parents are eager to hear updates as far as if parents are going to be back allowed in buildings, and what that requirement will be.
Yeah, so we are allowed to have parents back in buildings, but there could be some restrictions. Let me just find that space where it says that. So it says visitors may enter the school building, but limits should still be considered. We're required to keep a 30-day log of all visitors in the event that they have to do contact tracing. And all visitors must comply with the LEA's or school's COVID-19 policies and protocols, which we haven't really fully developed for next year yet because we don't have the template. But the good news is a lot of things can return to some level of normalcy. Like we didn't have visitors in our buildings at all last year. We didn't have face-to-face meetings. We had all virtual meetings. We're planning for providing that option for parents, at least when I was meeting with the special ed director today, as we're mapping out plans for next year for IEP meetings, we are giving parents an option to come in person or to do them remotely. So there are still some things that we need to figure out, but it's us figuring out how to move closer to what it used to be, right? Or at least providing the opportunity for those face-to-face meetings. Visitors are allowed, but there may be some restrictions, which we have to spell out. Field trips are back. That's a good thing. Like there's a lot that's coming back that, at least for now, based on our transmission rates, is a really good sign for us. And just keep our fingers crossed that we keep moving in the right direction. I know our state has a really high vaccination rate overall, which is helpful. So I'm hoping for the best. And I will have some community forums like I did last summer. I had several of them last summer. I'll do it again. But I'm thinking that I don't want to have a community forum and then have questions come up that I don't know how to respond to, because I don't even have the template yet to tell me, what I'm allowed to or not allowed to address. So as soon as that comes out, I'll start the community reach out. We'll do the surveys again. We'll have the community forums. I think people have been pretty clear about where they stand. So I don't think it's going to be that complicated, but I know things like that will require some thinking through so that we can communicate that to the families. They need to know in advance.
Are there any other comments or questions on this topic at this time? All right, proceeding next topic. School committee legal representation.
Oh, yeah, I just have one quick question for Jim. Does that mean we can maybe meet in person in September?
Yeah, I was thinking that we were going to meet in person today. I believe, and I don't have it in front of me, but I believe that the governor extended the executive order for virtual meetings of public bodies really only, I think, until the end of this month. Correct. So I think that as of right now, we will be required to meet in person at our next meeting in August.
Oh, wow. That's great.
I think I'm right on that.
Maybe. Yeah, the governor can only extend every 30 days, and now he's extended it through the first week in August. That's not to say he's not going to extend it another month, but where many states are not extending, he has extended through the first week in August.
Okay.
But there is also a move in the General Assembly to allow for some virtual meetings also. That hasn't passed, but they're going to come back in session during the summer. and they may take it up then.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, you know, we have the option to do one or the other. So I just did what I was asked to do. But if the committee wants to meet in person, then we'll just set it up in person. Like, I don't have a preference one way or the other at this point.
We also have the capacity to do hybrid, where the public can join via virtual and the committee meets in person.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, and I think that's really helpful too. We've actually had more community members join at various points since we went to virtual than we ever get in person. So it might be an opportunity for us to, you know, just expand their ability to participate in public meetings. But whatever the committee wants to do, we're prepared to do either.
I think we've pretty much exhausted the topic at this time. So I'm assuming at this point there aren't any questions or comments at this point from the membership.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, moving on to new business, school committee legal representation. I'd like to propose a motion at this time to advertise in the Standard Times newspaper, North Kingston, for candidates to be special legal counsel for the Exeter West Greenwich School Committee. Could I have a second on that?
Second.
Thank you. Questions or comments?
Member Griffiths and Panday both have their hands raised.
Member Griffiths, please proceed.
Thank you. If we're advertising, I would recommend that we also advertise in the Rhode Island Lawyers Weekly. That is a publication that is both online and hard copy, and it goes to pretty much all the lawyers who are licensed in the state of Rhode Island and can be searched, jobs can be searched on it through their online legal database. I feel you might get a bigger pool of qualified candidates than if simply, you know, posting in one town. Thank you.
If Member Griffith has completed her comment, I would like to proceed to Member Pandy.
I guess my question is why we're seeking new legal counsel or applications for such. We have extremely competent, well-prepared, easily accessible, and budget-friendly legal counsel. They're a full education legal counsel. They do special ed. They represent every capacity the school committee needs, contract negotiations, meetings, any grievances, litigation, etc. I guess I'm not sure why we're looking for legal counsel. For the just one more thing, Mr. McFadden, I'd like to say, just for the members who are new to the committee, there was a time when we had different legal counsel for different representation, if you will. So we had legal counsel for contract negotiations. That was not a full service education law firm. That law firm specialized in contract negotiations, I believe, with unions. We had legal counsel for special education issues, and we had separate legal counsel for, anything else the school committee could encounter, whether it be student issues, grievances, etc. So the school committee at the time, we had a discussion, and it made more sense to utilize one law firm to handle all of our legal needs, because if you have one law firm handling everything, they're well versed in our committee, they're well versed in our district, and they provide us better representation. So I'm just not quite sure why we're seeking applications for legal counsel.
Member
Thank you,
Allen
Mr.
also has her hand raised.
The chairman recognizes Member Allen.
Hi, yes, coming from a business background, I know Bob probably knows this too. We go out every so many years for legal, accounting, and probably every year for health benefits and put out, bids, as you would call it. So I think it's just every so many years, it's healthy to go out there, and whether it's an accounting, we don't have to worry about that. Well, we do, actually, don't we, Bob? Come up and ask or go for our accounting firm that we use for our annual.
Not on, the audit is typically our contracts run 3 to 5 years.
I know we do. We kind of were in a bad situation. Yeah. So I think every so often, I don't know, do we have a legal contract with a lawyer? But so many years, I think it's healthy to go out and, put out a bid or ask for bids. And of course,
I
our
think
health, we can't do anything.
If I might just add to Member Allen's remarks, I think it's prudent. I think the current council we've had has been on for 7 years, so that's a long period of time. To be frank and honest, I don't think we've ever advertised for legal counsel. I think we've always used word of mouth. And I'd be very interested to see what kind of talent and legal expertise is out there. I mean, we may find that we do have the best legal counsel, but at this time, I'm just collecting information. And I think it's prudent. And after 7 years, these jobs are, excuse me, are not forever jobs. I will quote some history here. I think we had some legal counsel for 50 years. And we actually replaced that legal counsel not so long ago. So, I think it's a good idea. I'd like to see some by-town support on this matter. And I'm going to open up the floor again for any questions or comments from the membership of the school committee.
Member Panday wishes to be recognized.
Member Panday, please proceed.
I believe in the state of Rhode Island, there may be 5-ish law firms that specialize in education law. So I want to throw that out there. And again, I don't understand why you're looking to see what else is out there when you have extremely competent, well-prepared, easily accessible, and budget-friendly legal counsel. It doesn't make any sense to me. And again, in the state of Rhode Island, and Marianne may know how many, but there's probably about 5 law firms that can provide complete education representation. Thank you.
I think it's a good, do any of the other members have any questions or comments at this time on the topic?
Member Griffiths wishes to be recognized.
Chairman recognizes Member Griffiths.
Thank you. It's always good to make sure we have, the best folks that are out there. But if we want to make sure we really have the best folks, I think your publication of the job needs to be a little bit larger in area demographics than just North Kingstown. And there's several different legal venues where the best lawyers would see it and be willing to consider the position. So I'd just like you to consider expanding where you're sending the job posting beyond just the North Kingstown paper. Thank you.
Is there any other members that have any questions or comments on the topic?
This is John Holderman. I have a comment.
Proceed, John.
Yeah, so I'm a new member, and I'm I don't have a lot of experience with the current law firm, but coming from a business background similar to Diane, I think that it doesn't hurt to get a solicitation out there and let the best and brightest firm kind of shine and come forward. And If it's the current firm, so be it. If it's not, then, we get a better cost effective, bigger, faster, stronger firm to come in, whatever it may be. So that's my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Are there any other comments from the committee members? All right. I have one comment. I like the idea of advertising in the legal periodical. I just want to make sure it's not cost prohibitive. So I have no experience, and I doubt if anybody else on the administration has any experience on costing associated with the legal periodical you refer to, Member Griffiths. So, I think that if Jim or Bob, who would ever handle this type of thing if it passes, would use their good sense as far as spending money on the advertising. I mean, if it isn't like a ginormous amount of money to publish in the legal periodical, I'm all for it. Get as much exposure as possible. So I'm going to put my trust in Jim and Bob as far as spending money on both North Kingston Standard. If it's an online thing, it's got to be pretty cheap for the legal periodical, if it's just an online thing. So since we are hopefully not going to meet again in July, that will give ample exposure in the periodical and the Standard Times. So with that in mind, I'd like to move the motion forward. So I'm going to call the vote.
Could before the motion's made, Chair McFadden, could I just, so I just want to be clear. So we were talking about bidding, but I don't know that we're bidding. I think we're looking for an RFQ, which is a request for qualifications. It's a little different than an RFP, which is a bid. I'd have to build out a bid spec. It's pretty specific. It's, that you're looking for, the most qualified company with the best price for you, as opposed to an RFQ, which is kind of gets to the nuances around their expertise in labor relations, educational arena,
Special education.
Special education, those type of things. So it's an RFQ, or a request for qualifications. It's still formal. We still receive them formally, but then there's an ability to have a discussion, as opposed to a kind of an RFP, a request for proposals, which typically have a dollar value to them.
So my understanding is that, you're right. I think it is a request for qualifications. As far as requests for bid, it can vary pretty, a lot, on an hourly basis. It depends on how the law firm decides to bill. Like a lot of times they say, well, if I got to go to court, it's going to cost you $1,000 an hour. But if you're just going to make a phone call, it's $100 an hour. So a lot of costs associated with dealing with legal firms can vary from legal firm to legal firm, depending on how they decide to do their billing. So I agree. I think it could be overly complicated if we put it in as an RFP. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to keep it as simple as possible. That way we can get as many respondents as possible with hopefully their credentials, and we can make a fair selection. So that said, thank you, Bob.
Member McFadden, Member Allen has her hand raised.
Sure. Yeah. Chairman recognizes Member Allen. Go ahead.
I just wanted to ask if we should be amending then this to put a request for qualifications, and also to advertise in the Rhode Island Lawyers Legal, what Griffith said there.
What's the name of the periodical, Member Griffith?
Periodical.
Rhode Island Lawyers Weekly.
Oh, Rhode Island Lawyers Weekly.
So I will withdraw the original a motion?
Oh, we can just amend it, or you can just remake it. Either way.
Well, I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to withdraw the original amendment and just restate it with, as I mention it here now. So the motion again, that I'll need a second on, Diane, to advertise in the Standard Times newspaper, North Kingston, and the Rhode Island Law Weekly for candidates to be special counsel for the Exeter West Greenwich School Committee. Diane, I need a second.
Second.
All right. I think that's close enough. So I'm going to call the vote. Diane Allen?
Aye.
Mr. Pasillo?
Aye.
Member Griffiths?
Aye.
Member Monroe?
Aye.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Aye.
Aye. Member Pandy?
Nay.
Member Haldeman?
Aye.
And Member McFadden is an affirm. All right, unfinished business. EWG bylaw modifications, review, discussion, action. So I had asked, and I'm going to review this since this was about a month ago or more, on bylaw modifications, and I'm going to explain them as briefly as I can, unlike what I did with my last explanation. Basically, part one of the bylaw change revolves around term limits. I think this is an excellent idea, even though I kind of thought of it, but it's 48 months is the maximum any officer of the school committee can serve. And then there has to be a period of 24 months before that individual can serve in that capacity as an officer on the school committee. Again, so so you serve 48 months, you spin off that office. 24 months later, you can serve. You can decide to run for that office again when it becomes vacant. You can serve on any other officers on the school committee other than the one that you just vacated. The second piece of the bylaw changes, which I really am a proponent of, is it allows the school committee to check a chairman's ruling. So during the school committee execution, if a school committee, the person running the school committee, be it the vice chair, the chair, whomever it is who's running the school committee meeting, makes a ruling, the school committee, through motion, can overrule the actions of the chairperson. As an example, let's just say the chairperson has decided to remove somebody from the meeting, okay? And that individual or any individual on the committee can put a motion on the floor and be, so long as it's seconded, voted on in the affirmative by simple majority, can overrule the direction given by the chairperson. I think that's a very powerful tool for the school committee in its entirety, and you don't require the full committee to move forward on it. It's a simple majority. So if there are only 5 members on the school committee at in that meeting, then it's a simple majority. It would be 3-2, and you can override the chairperson's action on the committee. You can't modify the agenda, none of that stuff, but you can certainly say if the committee member, if the chairperson decided to do something, that an individual on the committee can put on the floor a motion, get it seconded, a discussion can ensue to override a ruling of the chairperson. There were duration of office. I got that. The other one's just and then the last one is there's like add a line in there for reaching term limits, which is kind of like associated with the first topic I talked about. And then the fourth thing is striking a sentence on the last paragraph of Article 3, Section 2. Strike the last sentence. Didn't seem to make a whole lot of sense to me. So at this point, I'd like to propose a motion to adopt the bylaw changes as proposed in the agenda. I need a second.
Second.
Thank you, Michael. All right, I'll move a vote. Diane Allen,
Aye.
Member McFadden, you didn't have any discussion.
oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. All right,
I'm sure you have the votes, but you should have discussion.
hands up, hands up. Let's not say that.
Member
Claudine.
Panday has her
Claudine,
hand raised.
who has her hand raised?
Member
Who
Panday.
does? Chairman recognizes Member Pandy.
So there's a couple different items on the agenda. So I'll start with your last one, Chair McFadden, Article 5, Section 4. A school committee member acting with motion as a majority vote may override a chairperson's action in the current active meeting. So if you call it a ruling, which you just did in our in your presentation, in Robert's Rules of Order, that already exists.
And let me just for the sake of argument, I hate interrupting people, but Claudine,
Yep.
You and I both know there are 1,000 different versions of Robert's Rules. But anyway, continue.
Yeah, all the school committee members got a blue book when they became a school committee member. It's called Robert's Rules in Plain English. And on page 82, it addresses an appeal that can be made by a school committee member to a chair's ruling. So it does already exist. It says, again, it has to be a ruling. So I think you have to define ruling. What is it? I don't know what a ruling is. But a member can make a motion to appeal a chair's ruling. It can be seconded. And then the chairperson gets to speak first and last. Each member may speak once. And then there's a vote to either sustain or override the ruling. And then you just need a simple majority to override that ruling. So it does exist in Robert's Rules, the version that all the school committee members have. And then let's see. Article 3, Section 2, you have strike the last sentence. I'm not quite sure why. So that last sentence is such data requests shall be directed to the school committee. So I believe if a member asks, the way I read it, if a member asks for some information from the administrators, the data would go to the whole school committee. I don't know why you want to strike that last sentence. Let's see. And then section 2, paragraph 2 and section 4. Hold on, I get my notes out. So that's limiting the term of the chair or any of the officers. Being on the school committee and having quite a bit of experience, I'd just like to say that an officer of the school committee is elected by the full school committee. All 7 members have to be present. The member gets elected by a majority vote, and they're elected for a 2-year term. We hold those at each organizational meeting. So each time new members come onto the committee, with the exception of appointments, that happens. Limiting the amount of time that a member can hold a term of office. It could place undue hardship on a committee. It could result in an officer who doesn't want the commitment, and it could result with an officer not capable of fulfilling the responsibilities. To remove a sitting officer during their 2-year term provides instability for the school committee and the district. So again, with my experience, I'm opposed to the amendment. I'm good.
Questions or comments before I respond to Member Pandy from the other members? So let me briefly respond to concerns of Member Pandy. Term limits, as I've described in the previous meetings, are a common practice. governor is term limited. The president of the United States is term limited. Most of the mayors in the state of Rhode Island are term limited. It's a tool that a lot of people like to see these days in their elected officials. We've had in the last 21 years, the chairman coming from West Greenwich for 15 of those 21 years. We had a stretch with Chairman Pandy, I think, for 78 months. These are extended periods of time, given the fact that, basically we bring it up for reconsideration every 2 years. So
It's a two-year term, Chair McFadden.
I'm speaking, Member Pandy. Did I interrupt you? I didn't think so. So again, but anyway, the term, to answer your question, is that the office is subject every 2 years. So anyway, I think it's a good tool. It spreads out. It's an attempt to spread out the responsibilities of the office between two towns so that one town isn't strangled by the chairman. I can't tell you some of the things that have happened to me, and I won't. So I think it's an excellent tool. I'd like to see us adopt it get a little support maybe from West Greenwich. I think it's a nice idea. It spreads out the experience of the office of chairman, vice chair, and secretary throughout the 7 members. So I think it's a win-win. So I'm going to open up the floor one more time for any members who have any questions or comments on this change in the bylaws. All right.
This is John Holderman. I have a comment on that.
Member
Go ahead,
Monroe
John.
does as well.
I'm new to the board or the committee, obviously. And I don't really, care, I guess, where the chairman's from. Exeter, West Greenwich, it's, we're all one kind of team here as far as I'm concerned. But having, Mr. McFadden mentioned elected offices, the president and so on being term limited and getting new folks, and new heads and new brains kind of running things. And I agree with that. Another kind of point of view there is even, having served in the military and being required to move every 2, 3, 4 years, it gives the individual more experience, and it gives the role more kind of breadth. So of experiences coming into that role. So I agree, just with my experience moving around in the military and being forced to go to new places, it's tough, it's challenging, but it gives people experience and it gives new points of view to certain roles. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Chairman recognizes Member Monroe.
I was hoping to get some clarification on your reasoning behind that Article 3, Section 2, that striking the last sentence.
Did you ask me a question? I couldn't.
Yeah.
I'm having difficulty receiving you in particular. Did you have a question on that? What was that last strikeout, removing that sentence?
Yes. Yeah. What's the reason?
I don't believe the committee. There have been instances where information has been interfered with when fair investigations have taken place by members, and the school committee, if it comes forward to the committee that there's a member of the committee doing some investigation on an employee, that's hands off. You can't do that. But if there's some, information that the member needs to complete, like what's going on with some money being spent, right? That shouldn't be delayed by virtue of the fact that it hasn't come before the full committee. And those things, unfortunately, Ms. Monroe, have a little political overtone. And what this does is it takes away political overtones and allows data to be collected. And by that I mean asking for information from the administration. Pure and simple. And frankly and honestly, I don't even think that's you can ask for any piece of data you want. It's an open records request. So when I saw that sentence in the context of asking for information didn't seem appropriate. I hope that answers your question.
It does. I think my concern there, I guess I'm understanding a little bit differently. It sounds like the request can be made and the data provided, but then it's provided to the rest of the school committee for transparency. Is that not how that reads?
I'm having problems. Can somebody, maybe you're on speaker or something, but I'm having a terrible time understanding what you said, Mr. Monroe. Can somebody express what Ms. Monroe just said? I can't understand it. I'm sorry.
Member Monroe expressed the same way I did, Chair McFadden, that a member can request the data, but then the data goes to all the school committee members.
Oh, well, that's not my interpretation of that sentence. I mean, if somebody wants to request the information and it goes to all the school committee members, by all means. But frankly and honestly, I've made many open meetings requests, and I don't think I've distributed it to the full committee. So, and I don't think that under an open meetings request, I'm required to distribute it to the full committee. I mean, God forbid, that if I ask for some information, but, my past experience, when I'm done with what I'm having to do, and I'm not suggesting to personalize it with me, I would distribute it to the full committee, or I wouldn't take any action. Therefore, it's not relevant. So I would not prohibit the full committee from not seeing any information. It just seems like it's overly cumbersome. Sometimes these things are time critical, and it seemed as an incumbent to me. I don't understand fully that last sentence, and I don't see the big problem in striking it.
Member
All
Panday
right.
has her hand. Member Panday has her hand raised.
Okay, Claudine, proceed.
Well, I have
Claudine?
to make a correction because you refer to you say there's no term limit, but there's a 2-year term limit on officers. And I'm repeating it because Member Holderman stated the same thing. There is a 2-year term limit on the officer positions. At each organizational meeting, it gets there's a vote with the full school committee as to who holds those positions. So they're not lifetime positions like a Supreme Court justice. They're 2-year term limits. So I wanted to make that correction. And then, Member McFadden, I do think that you should break this into a few different votes because they deal with different issues, just in case members want to vote different ways. So Section 2, Paragraph 2, and Section 4, you're editing because of what you did in Paragraph 1 can probably be in one vote. I would say Article 3, Section 2 is a separate vote, and Article 5, Section 4 is a third vote. That just gives the members the ability to vote differently if they have different views and opinions on each topic because they're different topics. Thank you.
I'd like to return to her comment regarding it's already term limit, it's 2 years. Well, you could say that about any office in this country. I mean, the mayor could claim that I'm up for re-election every 3 or 4 years, therefore I'm term limited, and nothing could be farther from the truth. I mean, the fact is what you want to prevent is the same individual getting elected every 2 years. So, likewise with the president, we had Franklin Delano Roosevelt for 4 years. I mean, he was a great president, but right after FDR left office, they went into said, okay, no more than 2 4-year terms. So, I don't think we're talking about the same thing, Member Pandy, when it comes to term limits. Term limits is just total number of consecutive months. And like I said, I don't think that's relevant. I'm going to see what's going to happen I'm going to move forward on the motion as I proposed it. Is there a motion on the floor at this time? I don't think there is.
Yes.
Oh, yes, I did make a motion, did I not? So I don't see there's a big deal, Member Pandy, on collectively putting forward all of these changes. These are pretty modest changes with the exception of the exceeds 48 months. That's a change, but I think it's a change that's been well, seen throughout this country. So People like it. I think we're going to like it. I think there's a big benefit for it. And as far as these other changes, they're rather cosmetic. So I don't think I'm going to entertain that at this point, Ms. Pandian, making them 3 different motions. So that said, unless there are any further comments or questions, I'd like to move forward with the vote on this motion. Hearing none. Diane Allen?
Aye.
Member Pasillo?
Aye.
Member Griffiths?
Nay.
Member Monroe? Member Monroe?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, I just don't agree with all of the parts of it. I wish we could have broken it out, but nay.
Nay. Member Pandy?
Nay.
Member Holdeman?
Aye.
Member McFadden is an aye. Okay, Charter Review Committee update. Jim?
Yep. Member McFadden, if I may make a comment, or Chair McFadden?
Oh, no, Claudine, we have moved on to the next topic. If you don't mind, I'm running the meeting. You know what? I'll make this one exception, but please recognize the fact that you have your way of running meetings and I have my way of running meetings. Go ahead for this one time. What do you want to comment on?
So I'd just like to say the chair needs to contact legal counsel to amend the bylaws with the proper language. Thank you very much.
Proper language. All right. Charter Review Committee. Jim, please.
So at the request of the school committee after our last meeting, we sent out an email asking for availability so that we can get the Charter Review Committee together. I did receive responses from all of the members except for our school committee members, but we'll set the meeting together anyway. People are kind of all over the place, but it looks like we could meet on Wednesdays as long as it's not a Wednesday when a capital project building committee meeting is scheduled. That seems to be the date that worked for every person who responded, the day of the week that worked for every person who responded to our request. So, the town council member from West Greenwich is not available until July 15th, which is this week. So I think that we, based on this information, if you're okay, we can start looking at the calendar and scheduling out a couple of meetings for Wednesdays. And that seems to be able to bring everybody to the table who needs to be there. And we can have the meeting virtually or in person, whatever the preference is.
Jim, as a member, are you planning on meeting every Wednesday?
No.
What do you think the interval for meeting? Is it going to be once a month or twice a month?
I mean, I think once a month is probably sufficient eventually, except maybe at the beginning, we need to have an intro meeting and have some conversations about the kinds of information that needs to be collected that people are looking for. Maybe we have a couple of meetings in the first month and then move to monthly after that, if that makes sense.
And who will be I guess one of the important dates that we have to be cognizant of is, when does the committee have to be finished by? Jim.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on when you want changes to go into effect, right? So if we want changes to go into effect for, if we want to have something available to go to the voters for approval, because charter reviews have to go, charter changes have to go to the voters, we have to have something ready for April, then we need to kind of map that backwards to know when it needs to be in final form so that we can get it on the ballot. I don't know how long that typically takes.
I would think that one of the things that that's important is when, it's something important that I think it would be good to have in hand to explain to the committee that there's a time limit that we're working under. So that, I mean, you have to bring it to both board of canvases, and then they have to send it out to print. And it's that whole exercise, which I'm sure you and Bob have great familiarity to. So
yeah, that's not that difficult. Like that, we have a date for when we need to get the language for the budget, and we have to get any other language that we're including has to go at the same time. So that's not too complicated. I don't know if we need anything to go through the legislature, Bob, for a charter change. Is that what we had to do last time? I think that's the time-consuming thing.
Yeah,
Correct.
that is the time.
Once the language is agreed upon, then to have it enabled or, put through.
Yeah, and so
Enacted.
in order to get the language to the State House so that it can be enacted, that's the tricky part. So I don't know what the answer to that is. But I would imagine it kind of follows the same as what we just went through for the bond referendum. Right?
It becomes a timing issue for the betterment of the core.
Right.
Doesn't that come after? Doesn't that come after it's approved by the voters, that you go before the General Assembly for adoption with enabling legislation?
No,
Before.
Okay. All right. Okay, I'll open up for questions or comments from the committee members at this point on the topic. All right, hearing none, I'm going to proceed to the next topic, capital project update bond discussion. Is that a Jim and Bob discussion? I'll let you guys proceed with that.
I can start. Important date, next Wednesday, the 21st is our next capital project building committee meeting. We currently hold owners meetings on Fridays, and that's where it's with the architect, engineer, general contractor ATC, or the contractor ATC, and the owner's project manager Downs. Those have been very successful. It's really about just keeping the project moving and on schedule. We are on a tight schedule, as everybody knows. So that's kind of the meeting aspect of it. The work going on, Steve Bailey, our director of facilities, is doing an awesome job. He's up there every day working with the contractors. We have demolition folks in there removing the hard ceilings. We have electrical people. We have plumbing trades. And then we have the HVAC trades. Equipment is starting to arrive. So we have the new units, the ERVs, which will be placed outside of each classroom. They help with the air exchange in the classrooms. It's part of the new design. Those are arriving. I think as of today, we have all of the units that were necessary to do the job in place. So that's one element that's moving along quite well. The interior VAVs, which are again part of the HVAC air exchangers, they're a little bit bigger, these units. Those are being demoed and ready to come out. It's really identifying where they are and getting ready to lower those out and have those ready to go. Those will be replaced with Mitsubishi units. The train units are the rooftop units. Those are the big units that make up the real crux of the project, the biggest maybe not the most labor intensive, but it's a significant part in that the presence of it. There's 13 of those units. We're going to start removing some of the rooftop units. They're being beneath the roof. So the ceiling, roof floor, the ceiling underneath. We're demoing and getting ready to remove those rooftop units. We expect right now a crane to be on the premises next week, but we're not sure. We're just waiting. We'll find out more at the Friday meeting. Of course, we know we have to give plenty of notice, to the communities so that there's safety is preeminent here. Regarding the cranes, right now, so they're going to remove some of the rooftop units and remove and then place some of the steel and some of the roof reinforcement that will go with that, with those units that are being removed. They're trying to stage it so that they are removing the units that are available to go back in place that we know are in the pipeline and are either on the production floor or on their way to the district. The further out we go with some of those units, as you know, some of the units we're not expected to receive until later in the fall, not later in the fall, but in the fall 10-15, so in October. So we're going to, again, disconnect and do the demo work, but not do the pick and remove until those units are available. So to make a long story short, there could be as many as 4 different occasions when the crane is on the property to remove or place units on the rooftop. Again, as we move into the point where school is in session, we have expressed and got agreement that any of the crane work will be done on the weekends. So hopefully that will limit, or mitigate any safety concerns that people have. So we're moving along quite busily. You would be, if you went into the high school, if you were allowed in, you would be pretty impressed with the amount of demo work. In the scope of this job is huge. That's all I can say. It is huge. A whole other element of this project is the bond, getting ready to get the bond out to the market. I'm probably averaging 7 hours a day working with bond counsel, the financial advisors, and the underwriters and the team that's from Rybeck that's involved with this issue. Not only is it taking up a lot of time, it's all valuable time, it needs to be done, but we're also requesting information from both towns of Exeter and West Greenwich, and it's coming through the town treasurers, and they're responding and they're doing a great job in getting us the information we need. But this is not off the shelf stuff. This is highly specialized. You might do it, it's conceivable you could do it once in your career. I've had the opportunity to do it 3 times. But I know for Maria at Exeter and Danielle in West Greenwich, this is not something that's in their everyday job duties and job descriptions. So my hat's off to them and thanking them for their work, because every time we submit a document, there are 4 different teams, highly legal, highly specialized people looking at these documents, and nothing comes back without comment and request for additional information. The good news is it should be complete by Thursday. So 2 more days of enduring. So if you see those folks out in the world, give them a hug and tell them to hang in there with us. And then just on a serious note, Karen Grande, who is with Lock Lord and is our bond counsel, she is offered to do a sort of a primer, if you will, for the district and for the treasurers, to make them understand what it means going forward for continuing disclosure and you know, the responsibility that they're going to have as the towns. Again, a lot of this didn't happen previously because we were bundled with Ryback, but there's been changes to the SEC rulings and they're requiring a lot more oversight. So quite dry as all heck, but thank God we have people who are attentive to it. So that's all the news worth reporting from the capital project.
Jim, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
No, Bob covered everything. Thanks.
I'll open it up the floor to the membership. Does anybody have any questions or comments on capital projects updates? Hearing none, proceed
Member
to
Allen.
important dates. Oh, sorry. Chair recognizes Member Allen.
Bob, I just want to thank you. I'm sure we all do for all the work you've put into this. It's been a long haul.
Yeah, thank you. It's a team effort for sure. Thank you.
Are there any more comments or questions from the membership?
Good job, Bob.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mike. All right, moving on, important dates and meetings. There is not a second meeting in the month of July, at least right now. Next school committee meeting is on August 10th, August 24th, September 14th, and September 28th. I have it annotated in the agenda that the August 24th meeting, if needed, so we'll find out on August 10th. I need a motion for adjournment.
Member Panday wishes to be recognized.
Okay. Proceed, Member Pandy.
On the agenda, Section 2, School Committee Organization, you skipped the motion to for a Rhode Island Association School Committee delegate. So I don't know if you want to do that now or if you want to wait till the next meeting. I'm bringing it up because RIASC is having a chairs meeting on July 22nd with the commissioner. So I don't know how you want to handle that. Thank you.
Who has any responsibilities for, does anybody have a description of this position, Ryzak?
Member Chair McFadden, the chairperson of the school committee, is usually the RIAS delegate.
Oh, geez. Okay.
When the association school committee sends out emails for meetings and with the commissioner and different folks, that always goes to the chairs.
All right. Okay. So I guess I'm the chair. Legal, is it appropriate for us to return to a topic in the agenda that's already passed?
Yes, because it's on your agenda, so you're not violating the Open Meeting Act. You can go back to an item that you left off.
All right. So we need a motion to select a RISAC delegate for the EWG School Committee, and it sounds like it should be the chairperson. So I need a motion to that effect, unless somebody has an urgent. I guess it's got to be me. Why should I say that? Sure. So would somebody like to make that motion? Diane Allen.
I'll make that motion. Paul McFadden is the RIAS delegate.
I'll second it.
Call a vote. Member Allen.
Aye.
Member Pasillo.
Aye.
Member Griffiths.
Aye.
Member Monroe. What was that?
Aye.
Aye. Member Pandy.
Aye.
Member Holdeman.
Aye.
Member McFadden is an aye. Let's return to the adjournment subject. I'd need a motion for adjournment. Would somebody like to make that motion at this time?
So
Second.
moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
I'll call the vote. Member Allen,
Aye.
Member Pasilla,
Aye.
Member Griffiths,
Aye.
Member Monroe,
Aye.
Member Pandy,
Aye.
Member Holdeman,
Aye.
and Member McFadden is an aye. Well, thank you all very much. It's hot, and I hope you have a very good July. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Night.
Night.